My son bought me a new phone. I was so happy, but I accidentally saw his messages to his wife, and when I read those words glowing on that brand new screen, my hands went numb. The phone he'd just given me, the phone I'd been so grateful for, became the very thing that exposed a betrayal I never could have imagined. My own son had been planning to take everything from me, everything his father and I had spent a lifetime building. But what he didn't know was that his mother still had fight left in her, more fight than he ever expected. Good day, dear listeners. It's Isabella again. I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. Today's story is one that still makes my chest tight when I think about it, but it needs to be told because I know there are mothers out there going through the very same thing right now. My name is Lorraine Whitfield. I'm 72 years old, and I live in a pale blue colonial house on Maple Ridge Lane in Savannah, Georgia. I've lived in this house for 41 years. My husband, Charles, and I bought it the year after our wedding, back when the magnolia tree in the front yard was barely taller than I was. Now that tree stretches over the roof and shades the entire porch. Charles used to say that tree was a mirror of our marriage, growing stronger and wider with every passing year. Charles was a good man, a quiet man. He worked as a civil engineer for the city of Savannah for 34 years. He designed drainage systems and bridges, things people walk over every day without ever knowing someone poured their heart into making them safe. He died on November 9th, 2019, from complications after a stroke. He was 69. We'd been married for 38 years. The morning he passed, he squeezed my hand twice, the way he always did when he meant to say I love you without words. I still feel those two squeezes sometimes when I'm falling asleep. We had 2 children together. Our eldest, Derek, is 45 now. Our daughter, Carolyn, is 41. Carolyn lives in Portland, Oregon, with her husband, James, and their 2 kids, Sophie and little James Jr. She calls me every Sunday without fail. She sends me pictures of the children in costumes, covered in finger paint, smiling with missing teeth. She is her father's daughter through and through. Derek is the reason I'm telling you this story. After Charles passed, I settled into the quiet rhythm of widowhood. I tended the garden Charles had started, his roses especially, the deep red ones he planted along the back fence the year Carolyn was born. I kept his favorite leather chair in the living room by the window. I left his reading glasses on the side table next to it, right where he'd placed them the last time he sat there. Some people thought that was morbid. I thought it was love. I had Charles's pension, which came to $2,840 a month, and our savings, which after the funeral and medical bills totaled $214,000, sitting in a joint account at First Coastal Bank that I'd converted to my name alone. We also owned the house outright, no mortgage, valued at approximately $385,000. Charles had made sure we'd be comfortable. He always said, "Lorraine, I don't want you worrying about a single bill after I'm gone." And for a little while, I didn't. Derek had always been the more ambitious of my 2 children. Even as a boy, he was calculating, though I used to call it driven. He studied business at the University of Georgia, married a woman named Vanessa Cole in 2006, and moved to a nice neighborhood about 20 minutes from my house. Vanessa was polished, always dressed well, always smiling, but her smiles never quite reached her eyes. I noticed that early on, but kept it to myself. What mother wants to be the one who criticizes her son's wife? For the first year after Charles died, Derek was wonderful. He came by every Saturday. He mowed the lawn. He checked the gutters. He sat with me on the porch and drank sweet tea and told me stories about his work in commercial real estate. He brought his 2 boys, Caleb, who was 12 at the time, and Mason, who was 9. They'd run through the backyard and climb the old oak tree, and I'd watch them from the kitchen window, feeling something close to whole again. Then, slowly, things began to change. It started in March of 2021. Derek called me on a Wednesday evening, which was unusual because he usually only called on weekends. His voice had that tight, careful quality to it. The voice he used when he wanted something, but was trying not to sound like he was asking. "Mom, I hate to bring this up," he said, "but Vanessa and I are in a bit of a bind. The market's been rough, and one of my development deals fell through. We need to cover payroll for the contracting crew, or the whole project collapses. Could you lend us $12,000? Just for 60 days. I'll pay you back with interest." $12,000. That was a significant sum to me, but this was my son, my firstborn. The boy I'd rocked to sleep, the boy I'd driven to baseball practice in the rain, the boy whose college tuition Charles and I had paid in full so he could graduate debt-free. What else would a mother do? I transferred $12,000 to his account the next morning. He thanked me profusely. He said, "Mom, you're saving my business. I won't forget this." 60 days came and went. No repayment. I didn't mention it. I told myself he was busy, that the money would come when things stabilized. Then, in July of 2021, another call. This time it was $8,500. His property taxes on a commercial lot were overdue, and there were penalties accruing. He sounded stressed, almost panicked. I gave him the money. He promised again that it was temporary. "Just a rough patch, Mom. You know how real estate goes." In October of that same year, Vanessa called me directly. That was the first time she'd ever called me for money herself. She said they needed $15,000 for Caleb's private school tuition. She said the school was threatening to remove him if the balance wasn't paid by the end of the month. Her voice cracked when she said, "We'd never ask if it wasn't for the boys, Lorraine." She called me Lorraine, not Mom. She never called me Mom. I sent $15,000. For my grandsons. Of course I did. By February of 2022, Derek asked for another $20,000. This time, he said it was for emergency repairs on one of his rental properties. A pipe had burst, tenants were threatening to sue, and his insurance was dragging its feet. He came to my house for this one, sat across from me at my kitchen table, looked me in the eyes and said, "I know I still owe you from before. I'm keeping track of every penny, Mom. I swear on Dad's grave." He swore on his father's grave. How could I say no? I gave him the $20,000, but this time I had to dip into a certificate of deposit that Charles and I had set aside specifically for home maintenance and medical emergencies. I broke the CD early and paid a $1,200 penalty. In June of 2022, it was $9,500 for what he called a licensing issue with the city. In September, $7,200 for a down payment on new equipment for a renovation project. In January of 2023, $18,000 because Vanessa needed surgery, he said, a procedure their insurance wouldn't fully cover. I asked if Vanessa was okay. He said it was minor, that she'd be fine, but the hospital needed payment up front. Each time, I asked fewer questions. Each time, the promises of repayment became vaguer. "Soon, Mom. When this next deal closes. By summer, for sure." I kept a small notebook in my nightstand drawer. After each transaction, I wrote down the date, the amount, and the reason he gave. I'm not sure why I did that. Maybe some part of me, some quiet, cautious part that sounded a lot like Charles, was telling me to keep records. By March of 2023, the total in that notebook read $91,200. $91,200. Gone. Not a single cent returned. During that same period, I canceled a trip to visit my sister, Pauline, in Tucson because I told myself I couldn't afford the airfare anymore. I postponed dental work I needed, 2 crowns and a root canal, because the out-of-pocket cost was $3,400, and I didn't feel right spending that on myself when my savings were shrinking. I started buying store-brand everything, I stopped turning on the air conditioning until it hit 95 degrees. I ate smaller meals. I told myself it was a diet. It wasn't a diet. It was fear. And through all of this, Derek's visits to my house became less frequent. The Saturday lawn mowing stopped. The sweet tea on the porch stopped. He'd text me instead of calling. Short texts. Busy week. We'll call soon. Love you, Mom. 3 words that felt more like a signature line than a sentiment. Vanessa stopped calling entirely. The boys, Caleb and Mason, I barely saw anymore. When I asked about seeing them, Derek would say they had sports or homework or plans with friends. Once he said, "They're teenagers now, Mom. They don't want to sit around at Grandma's house." That one cut deep. Then came June 14th, 2023, a Thursday, the day that changed everything. Derek showed up at my door unannounced, which hadn't happened in months. He was carrying a shopping bag from the electronics store. He was smiling, that big, charming smile he'd inherited from his father. He hugged me and said, "Mom, I got you something. You've been using that old flip phone for way too long." He pulled out a brand new smartphone, still in the box. It was sleek, modern, expensive looking. He'd already set it up, he said. Transferred my contacts, synced my email. He spent an hour showing me how to use it, how to text, how to take photos, how to video call. He was patient, warm, funny. He was the Derek I remembered, the Derek from before. "You deserve nice things, Mom," he said as he was leaving. He kissed my forehead. "I love you." I was so happy. I sat on the porch that evening holding that phone like it was made of gold, swiping through the screens, marveling at the camera, taking pictures of Charles's roses in the fading light. I thought maybe things were turning around. Maybe this was his way of starting to make things right. The next morning, Friday, June 15th, at approximately 8:23 a.m., I was sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee, trying to figure out the messaging app. I tapped on the wrong icon. Instead of my own messages, a conversation thread opened. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I realized Derek had logged into his own messaging account on the phone before giving it to me, probably to test the setup, and hadn't logged out. His messages were right there, and the conversation at the top of the list was with Vanessa. I know I should have closed it. I know some people will say I invaded his privacy, but something, call it instinct, call it Charles whispering in my ear, told me to read. The first message was from Derek, sent just 2 days earlier, on June 13th at 11:47 p.m. Gave her the phone today. She was so grateful it was almost pathetic. Phase 2 is on track. Vanessa had replied at 11:52 p.m. Good. Did you talk to Whitmore about the conservatorship filing? Derek, meeting him Monday. He says if we can get 2 doctors to sign off on cognitive decline, we can have control of her accounts within 90 days. Vanessa, what about the house? Derek, once the conservatorship goes through, we petition to sell. Realtor already gave me a quiet estimate. $395, maybe $410 in this market. Vanessa, and your sister? Derek, Carolyn's in Portland. She won't know until it's done. And even if she fights it, Mom will already be in assisted living by then. Fait accompli. Vanessa, you're sure she doesn't suspect anything? Derek, are you kidding? She just spent 10 minutes thanking me for a $200 phone. She has no idea. Something cold settled in my chest. Not sadness, not yet. Something sharper, clearer. I read the messages again, and again, and a third time. My hands were trembling so badly that the phone slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the table. I caught it before it fell to the floor. I pressed my palm flat against the kitchen table and stared at Charles' roses through the window, and I breathed, in and out, in and out. My son was planning to have me declared mentally incompetent. He was going to take my house. He was going to put me in a facility. He was going to steal everything Charles and I had built over 4 decades. And that phone, that beautiful, generous gift, was part of the con. I sat at that table for 2 hours without moving. The coffee went cold. The morning light shifted across the floor. I could hear birds in Charles' magnolia tree. And somewhere inside me, something that had been bending for 2 years finally snapped. Not into pieces, into place. I picked up the phone and I took screenshots of every single message in that conversation. There were 47 messages in the thread, going back 3 weeks. They discussed the conservatorship attorney, a man named Whitmore. They discussed which doctors might be sympathetic. They discussed how to isolate me from Carolyn. They discussed the $91,200 I'd already given them and laughed, about how easy it had been. One message from Vanessa read, "Your mother is a walking ATM. At least the machine is almost empty." Derek had replied with a laughing emoji. A laughing emoji. About his own mother. I went to my nightstand and retrieved my notebook. I sat at the dining table and spread everything out. The notebook with every loan documented. The screenshots printed on my old printer, grainy but legible. Bank statements I pulled from my file cabinet. Every transfer, every withdrawal, every penny I'd sent to my son over 2 years, documented with dates and amounts. The total, recalculated and confirmed, was $91,200. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called Carolyn. Not on the new phone. On my old flip phone, which I'd kept in the kitchen drawer. It was 11 a.m. on the West Coast when she picked up. "Mom, is everything okay? You never call on a weekday." I told her everything, every dollar, every excuse, every message on that phone. There was a long silence when I finished. Then Carolyn said very quietly, "I'm booking a flight. I'll be there tomorrow. Don't talk to Derek. Don't answer his calls. Do you hear me, Mom? Not a word." Carolyn arrived on Saturday afternoon, June 17th. She walked through the front door with a suitcase and fire in her eyes. She looked at the printed screenshots, read every one, and then sat down on Charles's leather chair and cried. Not for long. Carolyn is not a woman who wastes time on tears when there's work to be done. On Monday morning, June 19th, we drove together to the law offices of Barbara Hendricks and Associates on Drayton Street, downtown Savannah. Attorney Barbara Hendricks was a tall woman in her early 60s, with silver hair cut short and sharp brown eyes behind tortoiseshell glasses. She'd been practicing elder law for over 30 years. Her reputation in Savannah was formidable. People called her the Guardian because she specialized in protecting seniors from financial exploitation, often by their own families. I sat across from Barbara's mahogany desk and laid out my notebook, my bank statements, and the printed screenshots. She put on her reading glasses and went through every page without speaking. When she finished, she looked at me over those glasses and said, "Mrs. Whitfield, your son has been systematically defrauding you, and what he's planning with this conservatorship is not just unethical, it may be criminal. You came to me at exactly the right time." Barbara explained that under Georgia law, what Derek had done constituted financial exploitation of an elderly person, a felony under OCGA Section 30-5-8. The conservatorship scheme, if carried out through fraudulent medical declarations, would add charges of fraud and conspiracy. She told me we had 2 paths, civil recovery and criminal referral. She recommended both. "This isn't going to be gentle," she warned. "He's your son. This will get ugly." I looked at Charles's ring on my finger, the thin gold band he'd placed there 38 years ago. "It's already ugly," I said. "I just didn't see it until now." That same week, Barbara filed a civil suit against Derek Mitchell Whitfield and Vanessa Cole Whitfield in Chatham County Superior Court, seeking full restitution of $91,200 in funds obtained through fraud and undue influence, plus compensatory damages for emotional distress and punitive damages. She also filed an emergency motion to block any conservatorship proceedings and sent a formal referral to the Chatham County District Attorney's Office. Meanwhile, Barbara hired a forensic accountant named Gerald Townsend to trace every dollar I'd sent to Derek. What Gerald found over the next 4 weeks was devastating. The $12,000 for payroll? Derek's company had no outstanding payroll obligations that month. The $15,000 for Caleb's tuition? Caleb attended public school. He'd never been enrolled in any private institution. The $18,000 for Vanessa's surgery? Vanessa had no medical procedures scheduled or performed during that period, confirmed through subpoenaed insurance records. Where had the money actually gone? Gerald traced it meticulously. $23,000 had been used for a down payment on a vacation condo in Hilton Head Island. $14,500 went to a luxury car dealership for a Land Rover Vanessa had been driving around town. $11,000 was spent at high-end retailers, designer clothing, jewelry, electronics. $8,700 went to a country club membership. The remaining funds were scattered across restaurant bills, spa treatments, a $6,200 family vacation to the Bahamas in March 2023, just 3 months before Derek handed me that phone with a smile and called me Mom. While I'd been eating store-brand cereal and skipping dental work, my son and his wife had been living lavishly on my money, on Charles's money, on the pension of a man who spent 34 years building bridges so that other people could cross safely. Barbara also uncovered the identity of the attorney Derek had been consulting for the conservatorship, a man named Paul Whitmore, who operated a small practice on the south side of Savannah. Barbara filed a complaint with the Georgia State Bar against Whitmore for his participation in what she described as a coordinated scheme to fraudulently strip an elderly woman of her legal rights and financial autonomy. Whitmore would later be suspended from practicing law for 18 months. On August 3, 2023, Derek was served with a civil lawsuit at his office. I know exactly what happened because Barbara's process server, a no-nonsense retired deputy named Carl Franklin, told us everything. Derek read the first page, turned white, and said, "This is insane. My mother doesn't even know what day it is half the time." Carl reportedly replied, "She knew enough to hire Barbara Hendricks." That evening, my phone rang. The new phone, Derek's number. I let it go to voicemail. His message was 38 seconds long. His voice was shaking, but not with remorse, with rage. "Mom, I don't know what Carolyn has been telling you, but you need to call off this lawyer immediately. You're going to embarrass this entire family. I've done nothing but help you, and this is how you repay me? If you don't drop this by Friday, I will have you evaluated. I will prove you're not competent to make these decisions, and then we'll see who has the last word." I saved that voicemail. Barbara entered it into evidence. 2 days later, Vanessa began calling relatives. She called my sister Pauline in Tucson. She called Charles's brother, Uncle Roy, in Macon. She called neighbors. She called women from my church, Grace Fellowship on Abercorn Street. Her story was always the same. Lorraine is losing her mind. Carolyn is manipulating her. We're just trying to protect her, and now she's suing her own son. Can you believe it? Some people believed her for about a week. Then Barbara sent a carefully worded letter to every person Vanessa had contacted, outlining the facts, the lawsuit, and a polite suggestion that spreading false statements about a plaintiff in active litigation could itself constitute defamation. The calls from Vanessa stopped, but Derek wasn't finished. On August 14th, a Monday, he drove to my house. I was in the garden, kneeling by Charles's roses, when I heard his car pull up. He didn't knock. He walked straight around the side of the house and into the backyard. His face was red. His jaw was tight. "You need to stop this, Mom. Right now." I stood up slowly. My knees ached. I held the garden shears in my right hand, not as a threat, just because I'd been trimming. You need to leave, Derek. I'm your son. Then act like one. He stepped closer. You have no idea what you're doing. That lawyer is filling your head with nonsense. Everything I borrowed, I was going to pay back. Every cent. With what? The condo in Hilton Head? The Land Rover? The trip to the Bahamas? His face changed. The anger flickered into something else. Something cornered and desperate. Who told you about that? A forensic accountant named Gerald Townsend. He's very thorough. Derek stared at me for a long moment. Then he said something I will never forget. Dad would be ashamed of you, suing your own family. I felt those words like a slap, but I didn't flinch. Your father kept meticulous records of every penny he ever earned. He taught me to do the same. And if he were standing here right now, Derek, it wouldn't be me he'd be ashamed of. He left, tires screeching on the pavement. My neighbor, Helen Porter, had been watching from her porch. She came over with a glass of lemonade and sat with me until my hands stopped shaking. You did the right thing, Lorraine, Helen said. That boy's been no good since his daddy died. The following week, I filed a police report with the Savannah-Chatham Metropolitan Police Department. The case was assigned to Detective Maria Rodriguez, a compact woman with kind eyes and a voice that could cut through steel when she needed it to. Detective Rodriguez interviewed me for 2 hours. She reviewed the screenshots, the financial records, Gerald Townsend's forensic report, and Derek's voicemail. She said, Mrs. Whitfield, I've worked elder exploitation cases for 11 years. This is one of the most well-documented cases I've ever seen. You did an extraordinary job preserving evidence. Based on the investigation, the Chatham County District Attorney's Office filed criminal charges against Derek Mitchell Whitfield. 2 counts of financial exploitation of an elderly person, 1 count of fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit fraud. Vanessa Cole Whitfield was named as a co-conspirator. The civil trial began on October 23, 2023, in Courtroom 3 of the Chatham County Superior Courthouse. The presiding judge was the Honorable Raymond T. Sullivan, a veteran jurist known for his patience, his precision, and his complete intolerance for anyone who wasted his court's time. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Wood-paneled walls, fluorescent lights, an American flag standing beside the judge's bench. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Barbara Hendricks. Carolyn sat directly behind me in the gallery, her hand resting on the wooden railing like she could steady me through it. Derek sat at the defendant's table with his attorney, a younger man named Philip Crane, who Barbara later described as competent but outmatched. Vanessa sat in the gallery behind Derek, wearing a cream-colored blazer and an expression of practiced innocence. Barbara presented the case methodically. She began with my bank records, projected onto a screen for the court. 14 separate transfers totaling $91,200, each one matched with the corresponding entry in my notebook and the excuse Derek had given. She presented Gerald Townsend's forensic analysis showing that none of the stated reasons for the loans were legitimate. Gerald himself testified, walking the court through each transaction with the calm authority of a man who'd spent 30 years following money. Then Barbara showed the screenshots. 47 messages between Derek and Vanessa, displayed on the courtroom screen one by one. The gallery went silent. I watched the judge's face as he read the messages. His expression didn't change much, but his jaw tightened when he reached the message where Vanessa called me a walking ATM. I testified for 45 minutes. Barbara asked me simple questions: how much I'd given, why I'd given it, what I'd been told, what I'd sacrificed. I told the court about the canceled trip to see my sister, about the dental work I'd postponed, about the store brand groceries and the air conditioning I wouldn't turn on, about eating smaller meals and telling myself it was a diet. When I described finding the messages on the phone Derek gave me, my voice broke just once. I took a breath, looked at Charles's ring on my finger, and kept going. Philip Crane cross-examined me briefly. He tried to suggest that the loans were genuine and that I'd given the money willingly. Barbara objected and noted that willingness obtained through systematic deception is not true consent. Judge Sullivan sustained the objection. Derek took the stand. Philip Crane led him through a version of events that painted everything as legitimate business difficulties and sincere family support. Derek was smooth, articulate, convincing. He looked at me with practiced sadness and said, "I love my mother. I would never hurt her." Then Barbara Hendricks stood up for cross-examination. She spent 90 minutes dismantling every word Derek had said. She showed receipts from the Hilton Head condo purchase, dated the same week he told me he needed $12,000 for payroll. She showed the Land Rover lease, signed 3 days after I transferred $15,000 for tuition at a school Caleb never attended. She showed Bahamas resort charges on Vanessa's credit card during the month he claimed to need $18,000 for surgery. And then she showed the messages again, the ones about the conservatorship, the ones about selling my house, the one where he said I was almost pathetic. "Mr. Whitfield," Barbara said, standing perfectly still, her voice measured and clear, "did you or did you not write to your wife?" And I quote, "She was so grateful, it was almost pathetic. Phase 2 is on track," end quote. Derek's attorney objected. Judge Sullivan overruled. Derek said, "That was taken out of context. What context makes calling your 72-year-old mother pathetic acceptable, Mr. Whitfield?" He didn't answer. Judge Sullivan's ruling came on November 8, 2023. He spoke for 12 minutes from the bench, and I remember every word as if they were carved into stone. "The evidence presented in this case paints a disturbing and deeply troubling picture," Judge Sullivan said. "The defendant systematically exploited the trust, love, and financial resources of his elderly mother through a calculated pattern of deception spanning more than 2 years. Every reason given for the funds requested was fabricated. The money was not used for business emergencies, tuition, or medical care. It was used for the personal enrichment and lifestyle inflation of the defendant and his wife. Furthermore, the defendant actively conspired to pursue fraudulent conservatorship proceedings designed to strip the plaintiff of her autonomy and seize her remaining assets, including her home of 4 decades. He paused and looked directly at Derek. "The court finds in favor of the plaintiff on all counts. The defendant is ordered to pay full restitution in the amount of $91,200 for funds obtained through fraud and undue influence. The court further awards compensatory damages in the amount of $45,000 for emotional distress and punitive damages in the amount of $75,000, intended to reflect the severity and calculated nature of the defendant's conduct. Total judgment, $211,200. The courtroom was silent. Derek's face was gray. Vanessa had left the gallery before the ruling was finished. I heard her heels clicking down the hallway outside. Barbara placed her hand over mine under the table and squeezed. Carolyn was crying quietly behind me. The criminal case followed in January of 2024. Derek pleaded no contest to 1 count of financial exploitation of an elderly person and 1 count of fraud. He was sentenced to 5 years of probation, 400 hours of community service, and was required to complete a financial restitution plan approved by the court. He narrowly avoided prison time only because it was his first criminal offense. Vanessa was given 2 years of probation as a co-conspirator, but the legal consequences were only the beginning. To satisfy the civil judgment of $211,200, Derek was forced to liquidate assets. The Hilton Head condo, which he'd purchased largely with my money, sold for $189,000 after fees. The Land Rover was repossessed when he could no longer make payments. His commercial real estate business, already shaky, collapsed entirely once word spread through Savannah's tight-knit business community about the elder fraud conviction. Clients pulled contracts. Partners dissolved agreements. His broker's license was placed under review by the Georgia Real Estate Commission. By March of 2024, Derek and Vanessa's marriage was over. Vanessa filed for divorce, not out of moral awakening, but because the money had dried up. She took what she could, which by then wasn't much, and moved back to her parents' house in Albany. I heard through acquaintances that she was working as a receptionist at a dental office. I felt nothing about that. The cruelest consequence, and the most justified, came from Derek's own sons. Caleb, now 15, had learned the full truth about what his father had done. A classmate whose mother was in the courtroom gallery told him. Caleb called Carolyn, not Derek, and asked to spend the summer in Portland. Mason, 12, followed his brother. Both boys stopped answering Derek's calls, not because anyone told them to, because they chose to. I saw Derek once more after the trial. It was a Saturday afternoon in April of 2024. I was at the Krogier on Victory Drive, putting peaches into a bag, when I looked up and saw him standing at the end of the produce aisle. He was thinner than I remembered. He was wearing a wrinkled polo shirt. His cart had frozen dinners and a case of beer. He looked like a man who'd been hollowed out from the inside. He saw me, too. We stared at each other across 30 feet of linoleum and fluorescent light. He opened his mouth as if to say something. Then he closed it. He turned his cart around and walked away. I felt nothing, not triumph, not pity, just quiet certainty that justice had been served. I picked up my peaches, went to the checkout, and drove home. The money came back to me in stages over the following months as the court-ordered restitution was processed through Barbara Hendricks' office. Not all of it at once, but steadily, like water refilling a well. By August of 2024, I had recovered the full $91,200 in restitution plus $34,000 of the compensatory and punitive damages, with the remainder on a structured payment plan. The first thing I did was fix my teeth, Dr. Alan Park at Savannah Dental Associates did the 2 crowns and the root canal I'd been putting off for over a year. When I looked in the mirror afterward, I smiled at myself for the first time in a long time. It felt strange. Then it felt wonderful. The second thing I did was book a flight to Tucson. I spent 2 weeks with my sister Pauline. We drank wine on her patio and watched the desert sunsets and laughed until our stomachs hurt. She told me I looked 10 years younger. I told her I felt it. I hired a contractor to repaint the house, the pale blue that Charles had originally chosen, freshened up with white trim and a new front door the color of ripe cranberries. I had the garden professionally landscaped and added a stone bench beneath the magnolia tree with a small brass plaque that read, "For Charles, still growing." I set aside $25,000 in a trust for Caleb and Mason's college education. Carolyn helped me set it up through a fiduciary in Portland. The boys would have what they needed, regardless of what their father had done. I donated $5,000 to the Savannah Senior Advocacy Center, an organization that helps elderly residents identify and recover from financial exploitation. I began volunteering there on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, sitting with other women and some men who'd been through similar betrayals. I'd hold their hands and say, "I believe you, and you're not alone, and you're stronger than you think." Helen Porter and I started a Wednesday walking group through Forsyth Park. We call ourselves the Magnolia Ladies. There are 7 of us now. We walk, we talk, we watch out for each other. Last month, Helen's granddaughter made us matching t-shirts. Mine says Original Magnolia because I insisted. I turned on the air conditioning whenever I wanted. I bought name-brand groceries. I ate full meals. I replaced Charles's reading glasses on the side table with a framed photo of the 2 of us from our 25th anniversary, dancing in the backyard under string lights, while Carolyn and a much younger Derek watched from the porch. I kept the glasses in the drawer nearby. I didn't need them out anymore to remember him. He was everywhere, in the roses, in the magnolia, in the house he'd paid off, in the records he taught me to keep, in the 2 squeezes of my hand that still came to me at night. Last Thanksgiving, Carolyn flew in from Portland with James, Sophie, and little James Jr. Caleb and Mason came too, taking the bus down from Carolyn's house where they'd been staying during the school year. The 6 of them filled my house with noise and warmth and the smell of pecan pie. We ate at the big dining table, the same one where I'd spread out receipts and screenshots and evidence of my son's betrayal. But that night, it held roast turkey and sweet potatoes and green bean casserole and a centerpiece of Charles's red roses that I'd cut fresh from the garden that morning. Sophie, who is 6, climbed into my lap after dinner and said, "Grandma, your house smells like flowers and love." I held her close and breathed in the scent of her hair and thought, yes, it does. I am 73 years old now. I live in my house on Maple Ridge Lane in Savannah, Georgia, with the magnolia tree that shades the porch and the roses along the back fence and the cranberry-colored front door. I have my pension, my savings, my health, and my peace. I earned every bit of it. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's this. Love should never be a reason to let someone destroy you. Trust is earned, not owed, even by blood. And the quietest women in the room are often the ones you should never underestimate. So I ask you, if someone you loved, someone you raised, someone you gave everything to, betrayed you like this, would you fight back? Would you sit at that kitchen table with trembling hands and choose yourself? Or would you let them take everything, your money, your home, your dignity, because they called you mom? Tell me what you would do. Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories. I read every single comment, and your words mean more to me than you know. Thank you for listening.